to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on my way home for my first day back at work in 2023. It's a bit miserable and grey and dark out, as is the case with January, but I've hopefully got some lovely cheery things to share with you about my New Year's Day trip out with Peggy. Now, the tradition of a New Year's Day run is something I really struggled to find any information about, kind of where it's come from. It seems to be something that I've always heard about, always taking your classic car out for kind of a drive or a run on New Year's Day. And I've got some really fond memories of that happening in the past. It's kind of up there with, I guess, Drive It Day, in terms of a day where most classic car owners want to try and make that effort to get their car out and about and in the world. I think it might be tied to the fact that so many of us have the day off. It's about 2 months probably since some people tucked away some of their more precious classic cars, and they're wanting to kind of have a little ride out, stretch the car's legs a bit and stretch your legs a bit after you've been at home over the Christmas period. So many people have the day off, so many shops and stuff are closed, so there often isn't much else to do other than go for a really nice drive. And so many places seem to have kind of got in on this, and there's so many exciting events that go on New Year's Day. That you've got kind of loads of options about what it is that you can do with your car. Now, in my ownership of Peggy, I've not actually had the chance to take part in any New Year's Day runs. Back in the 1st January that I had her, 2021, we were all back in lockdown and you weren't able to kind of go out and about like that, so there was nothing on. And then last year we kind of restarted a tradition with my friends of having kind of a friend's Christmas on New Year's Eve at someone's house, so they all came round ours, and then didn't leave really till midday the next day, at which point there wasn't really time or anywhere to go to on New Year's Day. So this year, unfortunately, whilst that was still the plan for me and my friends, one of my friends got strep, and we had to postpone our New Year's Day gathering, and so this was quite last minute, and I was like, okay, well, to make the most of the opportunity, I'll see if I can find something for me and Peggy to hop along to for the day. And of course, like I said, loads of choice out there, but I didn't want something too far, and I didn't want something that meant I had to get up too early. I'm usually all for that, but you know, it's New Year's Day, following New Year's Eve, you've been up late the night before, so that put some of the big events like Brooklands well out. Obviously being last minute and the tickets being well sold out didn't help with that either. And whilst I was really tempted by Stony Stratford, and it is somewhere that I would love to get Peggy to one day, being last minute, being quite a long trip for me and quite early in the morning if I wanted to get her parked anywhere, it wasn't something that I wanted to kind of go for. But the people that went to those 2 events shared some amazing photos, so I'm definitely going to have to try and get to one of those in a future New Year's Day. But what I found was something called Barrington Classics, which is far more local to me. Barrington is a village kind of on the outskirts of Cambridge, and it has the country's longest village green. I believe it's about 22 acres, and when we turned up, it genuinely astounded me at how big it was. The whole village is essentially this big long green, and they've got loads of stuff on it. And one of the things that does happen on it is pretty regular classic car meets. These tend to be during the summer months, from what I could work out online, but they are fortunate enough that the Green kind of council who look after the village green are happy for them to have a New Year's Day meet on the green as well. So having looked into it, having looked into the fact that it was probably going to take me just over an hour, and the bonus that it started a little bit later in the day, sold me on it. So I thought that's where I'll pootle along to on New Year's Day. As I said, I've grown up with my dad taking his cars out on New Year's Day, and this year it was the turn of Emma. Emma hadn't been out, I think, since kind of September, because she's had to have some work done on her, Emma being the 1931 Singer Junior. So she's had some work done on her. The last few bits went together quite recently, so Dad was keen to give her a good run and get her out again. So I headed over to their house, and then we headed over to Barrington in convoy. I had my mum as my navigator, but we were following behind Dad in the 1931 Junior, who had my sister and her boyfriend in with him. And we were a little bit late in setting off, so we decided to kind of forego the scenic route on the way down, hit the A14 and the M1, and pootle down at 1931 speeds, to get there kind of as quickly and easily as possible, in the hope that there'd still be quite a lot of stuff on, and then we'd take a scenic route back. So we got down there at around 1 o'clock-ish. It had started at 12, and it looked like it had probably been even bigger when it had first kind of got on, because as we'd got closer, whilst we still had a few cars kind of joining us in convoys, we got closer to Barrington, we also had a few cars coming in the opposite direction, giving us that friendly classic car wave as we headed towards the green and they headed away from it. And we were quite thankful for them, because it meant that by the time that we got there, there was some lovely prime spots for us at the edge of the green. And the green stretched on for quite a way, and there was still an impressive number of cars there. So we got there about 1 o'clock, and I think it took me about an hour to walk around the cars that were still displayed there. So certainly not a short little small gathering or anything like that. Really quite a lot to look at, quite a lot to take in, and really quite an impressive array of cars. It was really lovely to see some modern modified stuff next to some pre-war classics and sports cars, next to supercars, and all kind of something for everyone, and I imagine something to get everyone a little bit annoyed that it was allowed, but it really pleased me to see the kind of welcoming nature of the gathering on the green, and just the variety of things. And it meant that you could kind of go from one car to another and not expect to see, I don't know, I think there was a modified Clio next to like a Rolls Royce or a Wolseley or something more historic, and you're like, what a fantastic thing to kind of see gathering together on New Year's Day. If you've listened to some of my other podcasts, you know that that's the sort of thing that I'm a huge advocate for seeing more of. As I was walking around, it was wonderful to see kind of how friendly and chatty people were. I think there's quite a few regulars who make a big thing of regularly attending when there is that thing on the green, but they were happy to talk and tell you about their cars and their experiences regardless. Mum was sat with our cars for a bit, and she overheard a gentleman talking about Peggy. She had her little sign up in the window. He owned a 1920s Rolls Royce that hadn't done 27,000 miles in its whole existence. And so she wasn't sure if he was disgusted or impressed that Peggy had done pretty much about the same amount in just the 3 years I've owned her. And it's fantastic little interactions like that that make these little local gatherings, or in this case quite a large local gathering, such a fantastic thing to go along to. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get to talk to the owner, but as I was walking around, an absolutely awesome looking ratted kind of effect Singer Gazelle left, and it had unusual wheels on, and just a completely different look for a Gazelle to anything that I'd seen before. So I really loved the look of that. Similarly, there was an Austin 7 that just wore its life and its experience on its paintwork, which was fantastic to see. We spent a bit of time talking to a gentleman who owned a Moss Monaco, and that was something I'd never heard of, but he was so informative and friendly and told us about how it's built on a Triumph Vitesse, and kind of a kit car from the 80s that's entirely fiberglass, and knew all of his numbers off by heart in terms of kind of how many were originally built, how many were actually sold, how many were exported, and I think it worked out that essentially it's one of 18 that they believe was in the country. He's managed to get it met up with about 3 or 4, but they come in a variety of colours as well. And it was such an interesting thing to see, and something I'd never seen at a show before. And that's the thing about, I've said it before and I'll say it again, these local kind of events like this do draw out some really interesting cars that you might not see elsewhere. There were 6 pre-war like Rolls Royces there and 1 Morris Minor. Like, what sort of car show have you been to where you see that sort of thing regularly? And also, some of these Rolls Royces were parked in such a ridiculous way. They were like slanted up at the edge of the green, where the green went up to meet the road. It just made me laugh that someone had gone, I'm so keen to go to this event and to see some people and to catch up with some friends from the local area. I don't mind, I'll take the Rolls and I'll park it wonkily on the side of this green, to have a lovely chat with the people that are out and about today. And that was just such a great representation of kind of the spirit of these sorts of events. I also overheard a lady talking to, I was desperate to talk to her, but she was clearly getting ready to go and already talking to another couple, so I just kind of lurked and overheard. And they were there in their Lagonda, and she drives it, her husband navigates. They had fantastic period headpieces that kind of protected their hair against the elements, and the couple that they were talking to was like, oh, did you just bring it out to kind of local events like this? And the lady was like, no, we take it rallying on the continent, and on all sorts of adventures like that. And it was just such a cool thing to hear and to see, and just, yeah, it's those sorts of stories that, again, you just love about classic car ownership. It was a really lovely little green Wolseley Hornet, pre-war Wolseley Hornet, which sparked an interesting conversation between me and my dad about kind of how these names continued post-war but on completely different cars. Like a pre-war sports car shares its name with a post-war mini variant, something that's just you wouldn't see with car manufacturers today. They just kill off a name and start again kind of thing. So after an hour's odd walk around this field, what's village green, taking in all of these wonderful cars, I decided that as cars were starting to leave, I would situate myself over near where people were driving off, where there was some volunteers rattling some buckets for Alzheimer's, and letting people know that the next meet was April 7th. And whilst I was sat there, I would hopefully see a couple of cars leaving and get to use the fun little mode that my camera phone has of kind of getting speed shots. And what was really nice is that I had a lot of fun taking those photos and trying to capture these cars as they left, but also the Facebook group for the event. Once I'd been and I uploaded those in the evening, everyone was so lovely and welcoming, and also really loved the photos, and people were quite keen to hopefully get their car captured in a similar way at a future event. So I'm tempted to go back because it's got a great kind of way of getting people in and out, and you can get some really nice photos with the beautiful village green and also the collection of cars that are still on display in the background. standing there at the exit, I managed to get some really fantastic photos of like a yellow TVR that looked amazing, a couple of sunbeams from different eras, a couple of the Rolls Royces and a Lagonda, one of the pre-war Rileys. It was just, some great cars that were making their way out and made for some fantastic photos that people seem to enjoy. After a little bit of time doing that, headed back to the cars, and my family were pretty much ready to leave. So we decided we'd take the scenic route back and also swap some passengers about. We took the lead with my sister and her boyfriend in the back, navigating via map, and Dad and Mum were in the Junior behind us. And we took a bit of a wrong turn quite early on, but it did make for a very scenic and interesting route, including a huge hill that we'd seen kind of coming out of nowhere, and was a challenge for both cars, but Peggy did handle it better than I think she would have handled it in the summer before the engine work that we've had done more recently. So we made it back relatively unscathed from our little adventure through the Cambridgeshire countryside, and were happily satisfied by our little trip out for New Year's Day. I'm in the Facebook group for this event now, so it's definitely something I'll keep an eye out on for the dates coming up in the future, because I think I'd quite happily enjoy a summer's evening down there. There's a lovely pub nearby, so you can have a nice refreshing drink whilst you're walking around enjoying the cars, and it just seems so lovely and welcoming, and even though it was our first time there, and there seemed to be regulars, you could kind of strike up a conversation with anyone, which is always a lovely side effect of owning these cars. I'd love to hear what you got up to over the New Year's period. Did you take your car out on New Year's Day? Did you have a fantastic adventure with it? Did you go to any of the events that I've mentioned already? And what sort of things did you see? You can obviously let me know in the YouTube comments if that's where you're watching, or on the posts on social media if you've caught us on one of the podcasting platforms. I hope you've had a really happy start to the new year and you've got some fantastic motoring plans for the year ahead. But in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.